Hello. Welcome,
Hello.
everyone.
Grand Rising, Grand Rising. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Jennifer.
I'll give people a couple more seconds and then we'll let them trickle in throughout the call. But lovely to see you all here. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Is this the second week of the month that we are completing? Yes,
I think so.
we're
Halfway through
doing it. It's
already.
happening. It's well on its way.
That's crazy. I can't believe it's already midway through January.
I know.
I don't want to think about it yet. One step at a time. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off and let folks continue to trickle in, but thank you all so much for being here. So far, I think I recognize everyone on the call, but if we haven't met yet, my name's Carson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the B Network Program Manager at B Lab US in Canada. So again, thank you all so much for being here. We are super, super excited to be delivering this training opportunity with Kelsa and Aurora at Habitus and The Opt-In. Super grateful for all the amazing work they've put in putting this together, speaking to some of you about your experience as network leaders, and then incorporating it into this training. Our goal for today is really to equip you all with skills on how to make decisions that we hope are beneficial to you as both be network leaders and beyond in your roles outside of that and as leaders in the B Corp community. And we also thought that this would be a really great follow-up to the shared agreements workshop that we had in December. We have the recording of that if you want to watch it, but in case you missed it live, this was a collaborative workshop where we workshopped a set of agreements for how we could all show up as B Network leaders. So we're really hoping that this training provides some practical tools that will help you put these agreements into action. And especially the first four of them, which are practice respectful and direct communication, honor accountability while respecting volunteer capacity, embrace interdependence and shared responsibility, and foster equity, inclusion, and psychological safety. So we'll drop a link in the chat to all the shared agreements if you want to review those. And we will be asking all of you to sign them in the coming months. So stay tuned for more information on that. But just wanted to sort of ground in those shared agreements before we start. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kelsa.
Thank you so much, Carson. Hello, everybody. I'm Kelsa, she, her pronouns. Really excited to be here with you all today. I'm the COO and Senior Facilitator at Habitus Incorporated, fellow B Corp. And we focus broadly on conflict resolution, helping mission-driven leaders like yourselves resolve conflict, communicate even more effectively, and make better decisions together. I also run operations at Be Local Boston, so fellow network leader here among you. And at Be Local Boston, I'm lucky enough to have my colleague Aurora as our equity advisor. And so I'll pass it over to you, Aurora.
Hello, hello. Grand Rising, grand day to everyone. My name is Aurora Archer. I am the founder and the CEO of The Opt-In. The Opt-In is an organization, a culture strategy firm that supports leaders and organizations at the intersection of three fundamental things: transformation, culture, as well as business strategy. Okay, so with all of you here today, I think we've got a quorum. I'm seeing head nods. Carson, we're good. Beautiful. We'd love to begin by grounding us on why are we here? Why are we talking about this topic? Um, when we talk about decision making, most of us default to the what. What is the decision that needs to be made? What action moves us forward? But what makes most decision making challenging isn't actually the what, it's the who. Who's involved, who's impacted, whose voices are heard, and candidly, at times, whose voices are not heard, and who may be affected even though they're not in the room. When we skip the who, we don't actually move faster. We create resistance, we create rework, and candidly, we create disengagement later. Decision making is where leadership actually becomes visible. And in the current moment that we're living in, it's asking for all B network leaders to level up on how we lead, not just in what we deliver. The new B Corp standards are also raising the bar on accountability, on stakeholder governance, and equity. And none of this work, none of it gets done without strong, conscious decision making. And so this training is about moving us from good intentions to repeatable, trustworthy practices. And as Carson called out, it's also about embodying and practicing our shared agreements. And specifically, I'd love to make a connection to three of those shared agreements that we believe tie intrinsically to the tools and practices we're going to talk about today. Is how are we respectful and direct in our communications? How are we driving accountability with with our volunteers? And how are we showing up with equity and creating psychological safety? If our decision-making processes are unclear and misaligned, the standards become performative instead of operational. Back to you,
Thank you
Kat.
so much, Aurora. That's, I think, gives us a great overview and grounding of why we're here today. And the one thing I want to add to that is what we heard from you as we prepared for these trainings, because whenever we run a training like this, we want to check in with a couple participants ahead of time just to get a little more context on what would make this a good use of your time. So thank you to those who took the time to chat with us. And I just want to share a couple high-level highlights from what we heard. First of all, we heard that there's a wide range of models, approaches, structures in B networks. This comes as no surprise to Aurora and I. And it makes sense then that what works in terms of decision making looks pretty different in different contexts. And there's a range of formality in terms of how decisions get made. And that's okay. So Aurora and I are not here today to provide you one way to make all decisions. What we do hope to provide is two tools that should work in a variety of different contexts that you can then deploy in your networks. Another thing that came up is, of course, you all are paying attention to how identity and power shows up in your networks and in the way your decision making happens as we try to live out the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion values of the B Corp network. And one thing that folks highlighted was thinking about the way that seniority in the movement plays in to influence it and empower in decision making. So we thought that was an interesting nuance that came up in our conversations. I'm looking behind me because I've got some notes on this. Another thing that came up is an inherent tension between a desire to be inclusive and a desire to move things forward and get things done. And I think that's something that I've experienced in my B network with B Local Boston. And it's something that we're going to tease out and talk a lot about today, dealing with making the decision between those things that can sometimes, but not always, be in tension. What we also heard is you all are very busy and you want simple, usable tools that you can deploy with your networks right away. And so we're, as I said, going to give you two of those today, which we hope are simple enough that you can bring them back and use them without a whole lot of rework and adjustment. And finally, we heard that this training, of course, is an opportunity to be transparent with each other, learn from each other about how we do this in our different networks, right? There's no one right answer, but it's really interesting to hear what other people are doing really well, struggling with, etc. So we're going to try to make space for that today. Those are some of the things that made their way into our design choices. And based on that, I want to share our plan for today. Then Aurora is going to share a couple requests of you, and we'll get started then with a check-in question. Our purpose, as I said, is to give you a shared language for talking about decision-making in B networks and those two tools that you can deploy. By the end of today, you'll have the workbook that we've put all the content into for you to take home. Radha's going to put that in the chat. You'll have those two tools, and you'll get a chance to apply them to a decision in your context. So you'll have an example to walk away with. In terms of our roles today, Aurora and I will be facilitating together. We really appreciate B-Lab bringing us together, Carson, Rose, and Becca, who helped us design this. We ask that you all take your own notes. Our colleague Radha is here today to run tech, so thank you, Radha. If you have any technical issues or questions, please feel free to chat them and they're going to help you out. I'm happy to drop more links in the chat as we go. And from a decision-making perspective, you all are the decision makers. You get to decide what feels useful from what we share today that you want to bring back to your real work in your networks. And we're here to advise on that. In terms of flow, getting started with our welcome and purpose. We're going to do a check-in activity in just a minute. Then we'll share a couple models of decision-making that you can choose from. You'll get a chance to apply that to a decision from your context, and then chat with a peer about it. We'll then move on to 5 steps of decision-making that apply regardless of how you're making a decision. Once again, you'll get to apply to your context, chat with a buddy, and then we'll do a debrief, next actions, and Q&A. 2 tech things. One, you'll notice I have flip charts behind me. My video was just spotlighted, thank you. Everything that's behind me is also in the workbook. And so if you find it difficult to see what's behind me, you'd rather keep things on gallery view, totally fine. It's all there or in the chat. You're not going to miss anything. Anything else I want to say? And just if anyone is calling in by phone, but you're also on video, if you could just make that obvious for Radha so they can put you in a breakout room with your phone line, that would be helpful. All right, Aurora, I'm going to pass it over to you for our requests.
Yes, thank you, Kelsa. So now we know where we're headed over the next few moments that we have together. Now I'm going to share what are we requesting of you during our time. Today only works if we practice how we want to lead, not just talk about it. These requests that I'm going to share are not ground rules. Candidly, they're leadership behaviors. So I'm going to invite us all to push back when something doesn't sit right. Try on something, even if it doesn't feel familiar to you. We ask you to fully engage. Feel free to use the hand signal to raise your hand, and your voice matters. So we'd love for you to come off mute and share with us what you're thinking. And most importantly, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you grab your tea, your water, whatever will make this time together one that feels sustainable for you.
Thanks, Aurora.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's enough intro from us. Let's get started with a check-in with you all. Before we do that, any pressing questions from what we just shared for our plan for today before we take the next step? All right, hearing none. Our check-in question is topical today. Oh, Neb, go ahead.
Will we be able to access the recording to this session? Because I have a couple of team members that weren't able to join this call, and they asked and request for access to that.
Great question. Becca's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is going to come on Thinkific as a course, so you'll have the recording and the workbook to accompany it. Yes, that's true. Great question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, so in a minute, Radha's going to put you in breakout rooms, and the prompt is share a time when your network made a decision really well. What worked? What conditions made that possible? And this is going to be in your workbook on page 5, as Radha has put in the chat. It's going to be groups of 2 or 3. You'll have about 5 minutes. Just share a couple quick examples of things going well. Any questions before we open up the rooms?
Sorry, I don't remember the workbook. Was the workbook sent to us? I'm sorry. Where's the
Great
workbook?
question, Natika. Thank you. Radha, do you mind putting that in the chat one more time? Let's just wait till that gets there so everyone has access when we open up the rooms. Today's workbook, great. Can I get a thumbs up if folks are able to open that? Natika, that worked great. Perfect, thank you. Any other questions? The workbook is digitally editable, so y'all can type in there if that's helpful. All right, Rada, when you're ready, please open up our rooms. Aurelia, let us know if you have any trouble accessing the rooms. Rada, are they there on their own or is there someone else in there? Oh, they're off. Great. And just to confirm, we have the regular recording back on, right? Not just Aurora's note taker.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. Welcome back, folks.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Wonderful. We've got everyone, Rada.
Not yet.
Okay.
Folks come back in like 7 seconds.
Okay. Oh, now I see the squares lighting up.
There we go.
Hello, hello. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. So here's the beautiful thing. You all have been making decisions because you make them every day. And as network leaders, that's a beautiful thing. We applaud and we are grateful for the strength and the leadership that you bring to your different meetings, to your different leadership forums, and the governance that you lead across the network. So, with the example that you all talked about in your breakout room, we're going to invite you to go just a little bit deeper. And we're going to ask you to complicate it because, as we all know, decisions aren't always simple and cut and dry. So, if you all could go to your workbook page number 6, we're going to invite you to reflect on the topic that you discussed, and we'd like for you to take a minute or so to reflect on 3 questions. In the example that you talked about, whose voice or interest were heard? Whose needs and interests were centered? And whose were unintentionally left out? And we're dropping those 3 questions also in the chat. So take a moment using the example you discussed and drop into your workbook and reflect. And just as a heads up, after you do a minute or so of reflecting, we're going to ask some beautiful, wonderful volunteers to share what came up for you.
And for anyone who's just joining, we just had a breakout room where folks talked about a decision that they've made in their network that went well. That's on page 5 of your workbook, which Rada just put in the chat. And now we're complicating it a little bit on page 6 with some reflection questions also in the chat, just to catch everyone up.
Okay. We're going to give a few more seconds, and then I'm going to invite a volunteer or 2. Okay. So, in the process of making a decision and the beautiful conversation you had in your breakout, and then the additional prompts on page 6, who wants to share what came up for them? When we dig a little bit deeper in the discussion about our decision making, who wants to share what they observed? I can't see everyone on my screen, so if you're raising your hand, or feel free to come off mute. This is the moment we're taking to pause and to really reflect and think about.
I see Jennifer's come off mute. Jennifer, go ahead.
Wonderful.
I
Jennifer.
think reflecting on the unintentionally left out part, when we were planning our build, we did a lot of, internal speaking with the board and with our speakers of the event and things like that. But I think we probably could have done a better job of getting feedback from our community members,
Mhm.
and engaging them more in the process of pulling together our build.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Uh, that is a common, that's a common model. As I talked about earlier, we are so preconditioned to focus on the what that we inherently forget about the who. We are hardwired for efficiency, but when we actually take a moment to pause and look around and say, ooh, who did we not ask? We actually come up with a list of folks that would contribute so significantly to what we're co-creating. Thank you so much for calling in that example. Anyone else would like to share before we move on to our next section with Kelsa? Anything else that came up? Did you notice about what was centered?
Yeah, I'll share. I think I probably can share on both what was centered and what was left out unintentionally. I think for us, we tend to center what is priority to the leader group, and that is typically coming from the community, so the companies that we support and serve in our community. So because some of us may be more proximate to certain B Corp certified businesses in the state, you may have more information on some specific, issues that they're, dealing with. And so that then helps us kind of create solutions around it. Um, so in that case, if you are a leader that is more actively engaged with more of the network locally, some of the centered topics may focus on that leader's collaboration. That's not neither, I don't think, bad or good. I think it's just a matter of proximate relational kind of work. And then I would think what's missing maybe or what's not unintentionally left out is by nature of the businesses that we may serve or support in some of these communities, you may not be as a leader of a network or as a B certified company proximate to the marginalized community that we want to serve. And so one of the things that I will grapple with, I've been grappling with as the Jedi chair is that's priority to me, it's priority to a lot of the individuals, but it may not be proximate to your day to day. So I find myself bringing those proximate topics to the community because it's a priority in the day to day of my world and life. And I think it would be informational and helpful for the community to be aware of some of those similar business issues that marginalized leaders may be facing, like in our community or adjacent to our community. So um, I think that that is what comes to mind when I think of those two questions.
Absolutely beautiful, Natika. Thank you so much. And I think that what you're calling in is that when we deprioritize the who, many times we don't even realize that we might be doing it based on the intersection of our identities and based on the historical context of our experience. We don't do it because we don't care. We do it because, as Natika calls in, we may not be proximate. And other times, what happens is that urgency, capacity gets in the way. And our good intentions push us towards efficiency versus looking at the greater context of who with a greater level of care. So, thank you all for sharing. And now I'll pass to you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Aurora. Thank you, everybody. We're going to get into the first tool we want to share with you today. But before we do that, I'd like to ask you to open up your workbook to page 7 and do just step 1 that's on there, which is answer the question, what's a decision you have coming up that you'd like to use as an example for this training? The tools that we're going to teach you are going to come to life with some real examples. And so I just want to give you a chance to think of one in your context from your network that you can use as an example. So if everyone could do that and give me a thumbs up or some indication when you've got an example, we'll keep going. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. Thanks, Neb. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Samantha. Okay, they're coming fast in the chat, so we'll keep going. So to bring it back to Aurora's point around the who, one of the challenges that you all have just been talking about is deciding who to include and how much to include folks in your decision. So I want to ask you 2 questions. The first is, who's ever been under consulted in a decision-making process? You would have liked to be more consulted and you weren't consulted as much. Okay, I'm seeing lots of hands for sure. Now let me ask you the flip side of this question. Who's ever been over consulted in a decision-making process? You wish your colleague would just make that decision, but they keep circling back. Yep, I'm seeing about a similar number of hands. So there's not a right or wrong answer here. It's getting the right balance for the decision you're making and the folks who are involved. And so the first tool we want to share with you, and this is on page 9 of your workbook, if the flip charts are tricky to see, is what Aurora and I are calling like a speedometer or a spectrum of decision-making options. And over here on the left, we've got leader decides with input. We've got a small group deciding for the whole. We've got consent, and then to consensus. Now, you could think of this spectrum going even further towards command and control, perhaps. But what Aurora and I want to recommend to be network leaders is we don't go all the way to command and control, where we're just making decisions willy-nilly with no input. But the option of leader deciding with input isn't a perfectly valid option. I think what I mean by small group is pretty clear. What I mean by consent is no one blocks the decision. No one absolutely refuses it, but we don't have to get everyone on board with loving it. And then when we get to consensus, that's where we're really looking for, a strong yes from everyone involved. And what you'll see on the bottom of that workbook, page 9, is there's a couple of levers here that come into play when you move on this spectrum. There's time, of course, right? Leader deciding with input is almost certainly faster than over here on the consensus side. Buy-in's another lever, right? If we're over on consensus, we probably have a very high level of buy-in from a large group. And it gets lower as we move over here, especially when the options more on the left aren't done well. We have number of people, my apologies for misspelling people, right? The number of people involved in the decision or making the decision. And then we've also got an expertise lever, right? When we're over here on the left, we're prioritizing an individual's expertise. And when we're over here on the right, we're prioritizing the group's expertise. So I want to pause there and ask you all, what are some of the things that you all consider as you're deciding where you're going to fall on this spectrum? Or maybe what are some of the levers that you think move back and forth here? If you don't mind taking me off spotlight, I'm just gonna, so I can just see everybody. Amazing. Any reflections? I might just call in a couple folks. If you want to pass, no harm in passing. I'll just move on to someone else and go ahead and put your hand up if you want to share. Corey, anything resonating with you on this?
I think it comes down to how much you trust your board that's with you. We try to ask people to stay in their lane, and that will come to them as co-chairs. I have a co-chair, and we'll come to them if like we need more advice and want a conversation with a larger board. But we work on the model of like you are in this position because we trust your judgment and we trust the decisions you're going to make. So we ask our board members to roll with what they're doing well and what they have signed up to do. So we have the time together to make really important decisions, but not hear feedback on every single thing because that wastes a lot of time.
I love that you're bringing that element of trust in. When we have high trust with the groups we're working with, we can be further over here on the left of our spectrum. And that goes over well, it works well. When we have lower trust, we need to move further right to build that trust, would be my opinion. Any other reflections from folks? August, how about you? Anything standing out to you in this? Sorry, you just took a sip of coffee.
I'm going to share what Shannon shared in the chat, the magnitude of the decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you
Simple
like to share anything else, Shannon?
No, I mean, I think that statement just summarizes it. If a decision is big, I'm going to ask other people for input. If the decision does not have a great impact, let the leaders lead. I mean, that's why they are on the board, because of their expertise. And it goes back to what Corey said, and it's trust.
Yeah, that makes sense. And thanks, August. Sorry, feel free to drop anything in the chat you want to share. Thanks for those reflections. Or I'm going to pass it over to you to add any kind of nuance to this and the way you think about it.
Yeah, and I love that Gage, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, reference the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the book. It's a gauge because every scenario is going to call for a different approach based on what's happening in the room. For the people, what is the trust that has been built? What is the magnitude of that decision? And so what we're offering is a visual gauge so that you can find yourself, you can find the decision, you can find the what you're trying to achieve at the intersection of the who, and know that this is what's requiring us as leaders, is that we have to be flexible and we have to stay core to our values. We have to stay core to our shared principles, but the gauge is there to help you, give you a visual tool when we get lost sometimes to remember, oh, let me go back. What are the things I have to think about as I'm looking at this decision?
I'd love to ask for just one example. Does someone have an example decision that they wrote down in step one that they're willing to share? And just tell us, where are you thinking of where it falls on this spectrum and what are you considering? Someone who's willing to share their example.
August, I love your input on the chat if you're willing to come off mute.
August has just got audio issues. Hard to
Mhm.
come off mute.
Christy, do you want to give it a go?
And the question is to share the kind
Yeah,
of the decision. Well, I think our Be Local is um, doing some work on decision making and
mm,
and and my question in the chat is, I maybe I'm not, I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Sorry. I don't want to
no,
go
that's
down
okay. It sounds like a meta example. I just want to know, what's the example decision you're thinking about? So it sounds like y'all are making a decision about how you handle decisions. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So how do we handle decisions? Like this is a very timely conversation and, you know, looking at that spectrum of in the workbook
Mm,
um, of these different this kind of different approach to decision making and coming to some kind of consensus on whether we need consensus. And so I'm curious because I think when we start to, I think especially in volunteer organizations, um, where we're all giving our time. Um, I feel like the discernment starts to get lower on like what is a big decision. Sometimes we're just doing the busy work and like chasing these little things when
mm,
we might need to prioritize. And I guess I'm curious about how to approach that in a way that is generative and creates space for people to be consulted and come together.
mm. Let me just play this back and see if I'm getting it, and
Sorry,
then
I know it's like I'm trying
no,
to,
it's
yeah.
great. So I think it sounds like you all need to make a consensus-based decision with your board about how you're handling decision making going forward. That makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's a big decision
Hmm.
in terms of magnitude, and you want everyone aligned there. But then what you're going to have to do with your board is think about all of these levers, right? Magnitude, trust, time, buy-in, number of people, where the expertise is, and give
Hmm.
yourself some criteria, right? These are the types of decisions that are high magnitude, require high trust, need a lot of buy-in. Those are the ones where we're going to be over here with our board. And then there's going to be other decisions, that the nitty-gritty that you talked about,
Hmm.
where, time matters. We're relying on individual expertise. And I think it's really smart to define with your board what those decisions are, give some
Hmm.
examples so people have a little bit of guidance of, oh, I'm making, I'm deciding, this is an example from Be Local Boston, not to throw us under the bus, I'm deciding what wine glasses to use in an event. A consensus-based decision, not the right
No.
move. It's way over here. So feel free to put that example in. Or anything you'd add.
No, but
Hmm.
that's a perfect example that Kelsey and I talked about prior, when designing this workshop. I think at times, and I think Christy, you called it out, because this is a volunteer model, we feel that we've got to include everyone. And the reality is that not every decision is a consensus decision.
Hmm.
And we hope that with this tool, we give you the ability to have that flexibility. And I'm going to offer two things that are critical in this process is the discernment that you talked about, Christy,
Hmm.
and remembering that clarity is kindness.
Yes.
We get tripped up with that. We think
Hmm.
that we have to over index with kindness. And so we end up over there on the consensus side with every single decision when every single decision doesn't need to be over there.
Okay. I feel like that we should broadcast this out to everyone that is engaged in the B Corp movement. Because I think also what, we had the previous session maybe last month about having kind of hard conversations.
Mhm.
And I think that we're trying to move, I think folks opt for consensus because they're trying to be kind and inclusive, because this is the first time people have stepped into this kind of like trying to be allies and trying to be in a belonging community, and they might be new to this. So they're trying to make everything consensus and they don't know how to do it and they're afraid to make mistakes. And so, yeah, so how do we do that? Yeah. Like,
Christy?
how do you work your way through that with, especially with noobs, the newbies, like the folks that, feel less comfortable having those hard conversations or whatnot.
And so that is a deeper conversation than
Right.
the amount of time, but that's exactly it. But here's where Kelsey and I are asking you to start, Christy, is
Yeah.
leverage these tools.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm going to call in Natika. There are some of us that, based on the intersections of our identities, the ability to have this community and indigenous-based model approach is very embedded in the way that we lead. But I'm going to offer that even in our indigenous cultures, not everybody in the tribe made the decision.
Yeah.
That's why we had the wise women. That's
Mm.
why we had the wise um, council, because we have to divide up these decisions. We automatically default to that everybody has to be in the room because we are uncomfortable with a model that holds both accountability and love at the same time.
That makes sense.
Please send the recording.
Will do. All right, I want to give everyone a chance to think about this for your example. So if you go back to page 7 of your workbook and do step 2, what decision-making choice model here makes sense for your example and why? Just jot down a couple of notes on that, and then you're going to go back into a breakout to share with some peers what you're thinking about. Right. In a minute, Rhoda's going to put you into breakout rooms with 1 or 2 other people and just share out what you're thinking about. What's your example decision? Where do you think it falls? What are some of the things you're considering? And compare notes with each other. If you find yourself alone in a breakout, please just stay there for like a minute. And Rhoda's going to try to move folks around because we've got a couple folks jumping in and out of the call, which is totally fine. And then if no one appears, come back and find us. Any questions before we go into the breakout rooms, or Aurora, anything I missed?
All good. Enjoy your conversations, everyone.
And yes, there is an image of the chart in the workbook and it's on page 9. Great question, Gage. Thank you. All right, Roder, when you're ready, take it away.
This is the juicy bit, and this is the amazing thing about what we get to do as humans and leadership. It really is. And I want everyone to just know it's the juicy fun bit. It's not here to destroy us, to separate us. It's really just here to allow us to examine and evolve. Welcome back, everyone.
Everyone will be back in 10 seconds.
Okay.
All right, everyone's back.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We hope that those were beautiful and knowledge-bearing conversations. We're going to jump straight into this, but I want to clarify something based on what is in the chat. The speedometer that Kelsa walked you through, that's the decision making. Those are the different ways in which we can elect to make a decision. It is not the input model. It is simply based on the decision I am making right now, what type of decision model am I going to use? Am I going to use a small group decision-making approach? Am I going to make a consensus-making approach? And we want to separate what is the decision, who has to be in the room to make the final decision, because now what I'm going to walk you through is the process. And in the process, the 5 steps I'm going to walk you through, that is where you are driving the input of the who. Okay. And what we are hoping is in these 5 steps, our goal is for it not to drive bureaucracy, but for it to support clarity. It also helps surface bias, urgency, and our way of getting to efficiency. It also pings culture, and it also allows us to surface unspoken power dynamics that often shape decisions without being made. So again, these 5 steps are here to give you a tool, not to slow you down, but to ensure that we are cultivating and building the practice of pulling in the input along the way to making a decision. Okay? So the 5 steps are, first one, and these are all in your workbook on page 11. Identify the interests. Understand what people are involved that care about the decision that is about to be made. What are their needs? What are their interests? And this is what we call governance, stakeholder governance in action. This is where you're pulling in all of those inputs and you're thinking about, who did we not think about? Who do we not have the bandwidth to actually go seek? Or maybe because I don't have proximity to them, I actually didn't even think about them. The second step is generate options. Identify the components of your decision and brainstorm a variety of options for what you could ultimately decide. And I'm going to share with you, this is where we tend to get into very binary thinking, this or that. And in the process of having binary thinking, what we do is we fail to examine the broader aspect of imagination and dreaming of big ideas. We tend to cut it off too early because we're actually focusing on time. The third step is decide on a criteria. Figure out which criteria matters for your decision. How will you know that you made a fair decision? This is actually the step where fairness gets defined instead of assumed. And I'm going to say it again. This is the third step, is where fairness gets clearly articulated and defined and not assumed. Fourth step. Fourth step is that you actually make the decision. Put together the elements of your decision into a package that meets the interest of the group and the stakeholders impacted and involved. Number 5, follow through. This is where we talk about our accountability. It means that you pressure test the decision that you've made to identify predictable surprises. and we identify what could come at us as a surprise so that the decisions that we make are actually stronger and sustainable. Okay, page 11 in your workbook, and I think Rada also put those into your workbook. Kelsey, anything I missed or anything you would add?
I think that's a great summary. And I think the one thing I would add is just to underline, you're going to do these 5 steps regardless of which model you pick, but they're going to look a little different. So if you're over here on leader decides with input, that might be you on your board going out and getting some advice from the impacted community members. You take that information about their interests and needs and what they care about, and you as an individual do the rest of the 5 steps, right? You come up with some ideas, you choose the criteria, you make a decision, and you report back the decision you made. Maybe that's for, a low magnitude decision needs to be made quickly. That makes sense. When you're over here on the consensus side, you're going to have the full group involved with each 5 step. And that's obviously going to take more time, which we need to do for those high magnitude decisions that require trust and buy-in, etc. And so we're not saying that you need to spend whatever it is, 5 months on every decision you're making to get through each step perfectly. It's saying keep this in your back pocket to not miss a step, even if you're further left on our model. Or anything you'd add to that?
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. I'd love to take another example. If there's someone willing to put forward the example decision you're working with, and just tell us a little bit about the way you're thinking about these steps. Maybe you've already done step 1 and step 2. You need to figure out how to choose your criteria. Maybe you're at the very top, you haven't done anything yet. Is anyone willing to share an example? I'm going to call in a couple folks. Again, feel free to pass if you'd rather not share, but I'd love to just get one in the room before we all apply it. I see folks rapidly turning off their cameras. Neb, can I go to you?
God damn, I didn't turn my camera off fast enough. Okay. Yeah, I'm still kind of wrestling with this one, but we have a big decision to make here with something that I had thought was clear and it isn't. And so
Mhm.
it kind of it makes me question it goes back as far back like as our articles of incorporation, you know?
Mm.
And so like trying to figure out like who all needs to be involved in that decision.
Mm,
Um, it it it's kind of yeah, it's making me question like should I consult the small group first and see if the bigger group needs to be a part of the decision? And if so, how do we navigate that? Like how do we
mm,
follow through with that? Um, yeah, so like it's good. Like I prefer having more questions than assumed answers, right? Because when I'm asking questions and being curious, that means I'm more open versus like
mm,
assuming that I have all the answers and I'm locked in and I can't
mm.
be swayed. So
I love that. And I think you're making such an important point that sometimes we have to backtrack, right? Sometimes we think something's a simple decision, we can just make it, and we find out some needs that we realize we need to take a slightly different approach. And I think that's okay. Gage, let me go to you, and then I'm going to give everyone a chance to do a little solo writing.
All right. Yeah, my example that I was using is somewhat complex because it was all about bringing on new board members. So, but it fits in the framework in many ways. And I've got some examples of most of the steps. So like step one, identifying interests. First off, of course, we all chimed in on what all role, asked the board what roles we want to recruit for, like who's staying, who's going, what new roles do we want to create, etc. We kind of set up what we're looking for, and then we reached out to recruit from our community. And even in that, when we had people apply, we asked them what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, why they would want to join. So there's a lot of identifying what people care about and what their interests are. And then step two, generate options. We recruited a bunch of, or we got a bunch of applicants. We had an info session to answer some questions, and we ultimately then divvied up interview process amongst the board. So each board member was interviewing 2 or 3 candidates, for example. So that was kind of generating a bunch of different options for who we could bring on the board. And then for decision-making criteria, we use like a values-based hiring framework of our organizational values and kind of ranking each candidate in terms of how they match those values, but then also had people think about whether they, have the interest, the skills, interest and skills for that job, like if they're the right person to put them in that seat. And then we came around as the whole group and discussed all the interviews and the criteria, and had a conversation around what we each felt made sense for those candidates and how to organize them. Then we packaged up a slate that we could all as a board approve based on that conversation. And then I guess step 5, the pressure test, is we brought those people on and we'll see how they do and if we put the right people in the right seats. So that was kind of the example I was using and how it fits with the steps.
Thank you so much for sharing those steps. I'm a little jealous that you have that much interest in joining your board that you had to go through that each step of those process, but love it. All right, I want to give everyone a chance to do that, kind of thinking through the steps that Gage just modeled for us. This is on page 8 of your workbook. Go ahead and jot down a couple of notes for your decision for each step. And again, you might be done with some and you can jot down notes on what happened as Gage named. And then you're going to go back into your same breakout rooms just to give each other an update on how you're thinking about your decision. And then we'll come back and debrief and close. Aurora, anything you want to add as folks start jotting down notes?
I'll just add one thing, that on page 15 of your workbook, very similar to what Gage just gifted all of us, is also some examples to just support you as you're thinking through this and to give you a visual cue.
Thanks. All right, I'm just going to give folks about 30 more seconds to jot down some notes. All right, in a moment, Radha's going to put you back into the same breakout rooms you were before, except we've had some people drop. So if you see a new face, of course, introduce yourselves, give each other a little context, but most of you should be back with the folks you spoke with before. All right, Radha, when you're ready, go ahead and open up the rooms. Yes, great. And Aurora, I think you just take it away when folks get back and jump right in.
Thank you, Kelsa. Will do.
Everyone's back.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you. As the screens all light up, thank you for taking that moment. Thank you all for all of you that have stayed until this last closing section. What Kelsey and I know to be true is we began, and I think August, you said, always begin with the end in mind. We reflected and said, what do we want the end of this training session to leave folks with? And what we believe is that learning and insight actually mean nothing if we don't know how to apply it. So today is actually successful if you can walk away with one tool that you'll actually use. So we'd like to invite you to go to page 16 of your workbook and share your reflections on these two questions. What changed in your understanding of decision making today? And what is one tool you will genuinely take forward into your next meeting or decision making scenario? So we'll give you all a minute to just reflect on that, share it inside of your workbook. And then we're going to have a popcorn moment before Kelsa closes out this learning container and time with all of you. Okay, so theory without application means nothing. And everything around us is calling us to level up, not only our new standards, our new shared agreements. So what is hopefully something that you're walking away with today? Feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute. We'd love to hear your voice. And I'm going to actually start with you, Gage, because you actually took the intersection of the two tools and gave us a beautiful example. So summarize for us. And I know there's a lot of chat that's been happening in the, a lot of conversation back and forth. So what are you walking away with?
I think for me, it's more intention around what framework or model or process we're taking as a team, rather than maybe each of us bringing our own bias from like, oh, this is how we make decisions in my company, or this is how I've done it in the past. Like having an open dialogue about like, how are we going to make these decisions? Here's some frameworks, what makes the most decision, and just having that be explicit and clear with the whole team, so we're all on the same page, not just about the decision, but about the process to getting to that decision.
So absolutely love that, Gage, and thank you for calling that in, because I hear you calling in a couple of things. One, it's about being explicit. And this is the notion about kindness is clarity, but it's about us being explicit even when at times we're moving a bit too fast. And that's why to be explicit, we have to slow down. Number two, the intersection of our identities and our lived experience will have us have more robust applicability in how we make decisions and how we drive for a process and input. And so the opportunity is to say there's not one way, or one way is not right or wrong. It's like reflect, understand what the intention is, and choose the right decision making approach and apply the process to actually get yourself to the best decision that is inclusive of all of the stakeholders involved. Ned.
Yeah, I think for me the thing that I'm taking away from this session today most is it's almost like this work falls into two different categories. Um uh intent and impact. And um what I heard August bring up about the repair work, I'm seeing this now from like, as much as I try to find the best answer and we work towards the best decision, um, we're not always going to get it right. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things that will cause harm, even if our intentions are in the best of places, right? And I think as we continue to like build on the work that we're doing and grow this community, there's a container that needs to be taken care of from both sides, like not just in the intent, but also in the impact. And having that repair work kind of meeting in the middle with the best of decisions being made, we also need to have the best of repair work established. And um, I think having a consensus on both ends is just as important. Like I'm realizing now that like doing those two things is how we simplify the work and can walk away going to sleep at night knowing that we did a good job and not like tossing and turning like, oh damn, I think I did this wrong, I did that wrong, and like staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning staring at these damn screens, you know? I feel like I'm walking away with more clarity in how to do a good job and feel confident that, I'm serving my community in a way that um feels right to me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ned. And I know, August, you are having a difficult time coming off, but I do think um, that we do focus at times building one tool over the other. And Neb, you put it so beautifully. It's actually the ability to have all of the tools as we're going through this process so that our intention, uh, our process, who gets invited, how we listen to each other, the who and the what, and our process are always a huge part of how we're leading holistically and not from a binary perspective.
Mhm.
I think we have one last popcorn if anyone wants to come off mute, whether you have a reflection or a question, we're open to anything that may be popping up for you at this time. I'm just looking at the chat to make sure there's not a comment there that's important for me to see. Oh, can I read? I'm going to read August's comment because I think it's beautiful. The old world is falling apart, and we have this miraculous opportunity to build a new one that works for all, starting with the corners of influence that we each touch.
Mhm.
Beautiful reflection. Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about here. And we've just broken it down into two very simple tools so that we evolve from being binary leaders to what the moment is calling us to do, is to actually become holistic leaders. These are just two simple tools to support you in that process. That is so important in what you do every single day, which is making decisions that have an impact predominantly on people and our planet.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All
Cal?
right. We need to move
Oh,
to next actions, but let's take a last word from Kel if it's
It'll
short.
be real short. I'm just saying, like, this is the actual work. Like, it's like we think it's all the like outward stuff, but it's actually like it's this stuff. This is how we actually create change.
I love that. Beautifully said. The last closing word for me is just an encouragement on a couple next actions. Really encourage you to share these tools with your network. And if you need something else to make it useful, reach out to Aurora and I. We're network leaders like you. We're happy to help. Encourage you to move your decision forward. Whatever felt useful for today and the application you did, make it real with your networks and let us know how it goes. And finally, we really value your feedback, and B Lab is continuing to think about what's useful for network leaders, what meets your needs. And so we have a survey in the chat, and I'd like to ask everyone to just open it and give me a thumbs up when you have it open. And then we'd be really grateful if you can give us some quick feedback as we close up today. Thank you for those thumbs up. I know surveys are tricky to complete, but we wanted to just make sure everyone got the link now. All right, that's it for me. Aurora, anything else you want to say in closing?
Thank you, beautiful humans. Thank you for being committed to learning and growing and doing the work, as Cal said. We appreciate every single one of you. Thank you.
Thanks all. Carson,
And
anything?
tell us so we can improve. Do the survey. Thank you. Have a blessed, beautiful day. Thank you, Kelsa.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll see
Thanks,
you.
everyone.